Hey friend, this is Jennifer, and this is the Jennifer Allwood Show, the podcast for women who want to learn how to live an intentional life or build their creative business. I'll be giving you my very best business tips, bringing you interesting guests, giving you a daily dose of Jesus, and I'm committed to always keeping it real. Grab a cup of coffee and let's dive in. I'm so honored that you're here. Hey, my friend, did you know I'm hosting my first annual business conference? I think that by saying those words, that basically means I'm signing on for another one next year. I'm not sure. But anyway, we are hosting the Equipped Women's Conference here in Kansas City. This is a conference that's focused on arming God's women to do business in God's way. This is here in my hometown of Kansas City, Missouri, and we are so excited to have you. We're going to have some incredible speakers like top podcast host Jamie Ivey of the Happy Hour podcast. We have author and coach Dr. Brian Dixon, Jenny Taylor of Jenny Does Grace for all of you that love MLMs and network marketing, and then Chastity Stemmons, who owns Homemaker and High Heels and is also my personal stylist. You are going to have an incredible 2 days filled with tons of encouragement, connections, and tangible action items for your business. And so if you need a pick-me-up in your business, if you need a pick-me-up in your faith, then this is a great event for you. I want you to grab a girlfriend and I want you to get ready to be equipped. Go to jenniferallwood.com/conference and I will see you in Kansas City in May. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast this week. As always, I'm super stoked that you are here. I don't even know if stoked is currently still a word, but I think all the cool kids are still using it. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're listening. Thank you for tuning in every week and sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We have an interesting episode, show, whatever you want to call it this week. And I'm going to tell you why. I have previously done a couple of podcast episodes around the idea of charging what you are worth. And I really, right now, I have a bone to pick with that saying. And I also need to totally eat crow because I'm the one that said it. And I've also done, like, you could go ahead and Google it. I have done numerous social media posts on it, made multiple like memes, which are, just the little graphic things for Instagram and Facebook, and have talked about in my coaching classes for years. Charge what you're worth, charge what you're worth, charge what you're worth. Now, listen, one thing that I would like to think that I do well is I think that I'm really teachable. And by teachable, that means I'm open to correction and a change in thinking. And so often that change of thinking and that correction will come from the Lord, from the Holy Spirit. And I love it when when I see something on social media and I'm like, yeah. And then God's like, no, honey, wait a minute, Jen. And then I'm like, oh. And then I read it with different eyes. And then I'm like, oh. And then I'm open to just pondering and like processing that thing and marinating on it and letting it be like a crack pot in my soul to where I think, okay, do I still agree with that? Do I not agree with that? Let's look deeper at that. And so that's what I want to do in this podcast episode today, because I am no longer telling people to charge what they're worth. And I want to talk to you about that. Okay. But real quick first, I want to let you know that I've got a podcast review from Samantha Day, who has a sleep consulting business. Yes, that is a thing. She helps people get their kids and themselves to sleep faster. So this is what Samantha said. She was driving in the car, putting on makeup in the bathroom, and listening on Alexa to the Jennifer Allwood Show, that I am funny, relatable, and I hold the keys to success in business and in life. Thank you, Jennifer. Samantha, you are so welcome. I'm so glad you brought up the fact that, yes, you can listen to the Jennifer Allwood Show on your Alexa. Now, right now, as you guys are listening to this episode, your Alexa's like waking up. It's getting all confused. It's saying all the things, and I apologize for that. But literally just go to Alexa and say, Alexa, play the Jennifer Allwood Show podcast, and it should start. If it does not, will you please DM me, and I will figure out what the problem is. So back to the podcast here on charging what you're worth. So listen, I have two issues with that. The first issue that we're going to talk about first, because this is the most important one, is from a spiritual perspective, okay? Keep in mind, I am not a pastor, nor do I claim to be, nor do I know all of the things. However, when it comes to that saying, charge what you are worth, I want to remind you guys that you are not your work, okay? Can somebody please shout this louder, put it on a tweet somewhere, put it on a billboard. You are not your work, number one, okay? Number two, your worth is not directly related to your work. Okay. So I know that when we tend to be out and we meet people for the first time, so often we will say, hey, what is it that you do? And because we live in that sort of a culture here in America, I think so often our worth is tied to the job that we have, whether we are, running a boardroom or, flipping burgers. And I need people to understand from a spiritual perspective. And I know that you do probably at a head level, but I need my people, my women who are listening to me right now, my entrepreneur people, to really get it down deep in their soul and in their belly, that your worth is not tied to your work. Okay. So you are priceless. All right, let me just say that you are made in the image of God. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are the head, not the tail. You are above and not beneath. You are precious to the Lord. So when we look at that from that sayings perspective of, charge what you are worth, how does that work if you have a woman who's just starting in business? It doesn't, right? Okay. What about the woman who just needs a tiny bit of money from painting a little bit of furniture? She just needs an extra $40 a week painting something she finds on Craigslist so that she can leave a marriage that she should have gotten out of a bajillion years ago. Okay. What about that? She doesn't. So if we're telling her you got to charge what you're worth, and inside she's thinking, okay, but I'm afraid that if I charge that, everything gets messy with that notion of you being tied to your work and charging what you're worth, okay? Another issue that it brings up is if you have two people in the same industry, let's go back to that furniture painting industry, and they both paint a buffet and they both paint it in a delicious hot pink fuchsia color because that's what all good furniture is painted. And if one person is charging $300 for a buffet and the next one $3,000, does that mean that the woman charging more is worth more? Of course not. Okay. It gets yucky to me. I got to be really careful with my words because I always say gross and I got to stop saying that, but it gets gross. It gets gross. When we tell people to charge what you're worth, that's not what we actually mean. And I really want us as entrepreneurs, as leaders in the creative spaces to be super, super careful, okay, about what we're saying, because some tasks and some services and some jobs cost less because they require less skill. They require less product. They require less education. They don't bring as much perceived value to the world as what another job does. Okay. But the person doing it is still worth the same. All right. So if I'm talking to somebody who's flipping burgers at McDonald's, making 10 or 12 bucks an hour, they're worth just as much as I am. If I'm talking to a janitor who's at $14 an hour, or a girl who's just starting out in an industry and she's having to do a little bit for free just to get some experience, they are still worth as much as the one making seven figures. Can I get a yes and an amen? Okay. So that's my first issue with charging what you're worth. It's from a spiritual perspective. We are all worth the same in the eyes of the Lord. Okay. Let's establish that. Second issue is this. I'm super afraid that when we're telling people to charge what they're worth as coaches, as cheerleaders, as BFFs, as sister-in-laws, as people that are encouragers, that this could be getting some entrepreneurs into trouble. And I'm going to give you a really good example, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Here's what I need you to understand, though, also, that people aren't buying you, okay? You are not for sale. They are buying what you make, what you sell, what you offer, but they are not buying you. They're buying your knowledge, but again, they're not buying you. You can't put a price tag on you, okay? So that piece of furniture that you painted, it may only be worth $300, all right? The cleaning service that you offer, the organizing service, people may only be wanting to pay $25 an hour where you live for that type of work. But you yourself are priceless. And I'm super concerned that when we're telling people to charge what they're worth, that it's sometimes causing entrepreneurs to start jacking up their rates, okay? Because they're listening to this coach saying it and this coach saying it and even me saying it. And listen, friends, I need to just publicly apologize right here. I'll just be super vulnerable. And I ask for your forgiveness for those of you who I have told to charge what you are worth. I literally did not even know what I was saying. And I ask you for forgiveness for that. And I repent of that. Because there are some people that are just starting out. They're never going to be able to charge what they're going to be able to charge a year from now. So if they're just starting out and they've got all of us business coaches out there going, girl, you better charge what you're worth. You better jack up their rates. Now they're losing sales. They can't even get started. They can't even get started. They're pricing themselves out of experience and a portfolio right from the get-go. And so then what happens? So we tell them to jack up their rates, and literally they've just started. They need to be able to put some content on Instagram, content on Facebook. They need to be able to start a blog. We're telling them, nope, you got to jack up your rates. And now that piece of furniture, I just keep using that as an example, is sitting and it's sitting and it's sitting. And they're wondering, why is it sitting? Why is it sitting? I priced it like everybody told me to. And now I'm getting discouraged. And before you know it, that girl has gone back to a 9-to-5 because she can't get the money out of the piece of furniture that she wanted. And she's hearing people say, charge what you're worth. And everything just got gross. So listen, discouragement is a real deal when it comes to business. We have to pursue the opposite of discouragement in business, because the world's going to tell us to do it different or that we can't. Our bank account is often not going to line up where we feel like God is trying to lead us. Discouragement is very real. I need you to know from a spiritual perspective, every time you step out to do something different in business, there will be something different that comes your way. There will be a whole nother level of things spiritually you have to fight through or work through, because the enemy wants to keep you discouraged. If he can keep you discouraged, then he can totally prevent you from continuing down the path that God's got for you. So discouragement is a real thing. If that's something you suffer from, I want you to go right now to the Jennifer Allwood Show podcast and search for episode either 81 or 95. Both of those deal with the topic of discouragement. Okay, so listen, ladies, instead of telling people to charge what you are worth, I want you instead to be helping the women that you are coaching, or the women that you know, or the women that are in your industry, to base their rates or their cost of their service or whatever on a couple of different things. Number one, their skill. Okay? Listen, when you become better at what you do, you can charge more. In the beginning, nobody's good. Nobody's good. You don't have a skill. And you need to be able to show other people that you have a skill worthy of being paid for in the beginning. I remember several things in the beginning that I did for free. In retrospect, I wish I hadn't done it for free. But you know what happened? I did it for free, and it did a couple of things. Number one, it gave me some confidence. Number two, it showed a couple of designers that I could do a few things. Number three, it gave me pictures that I could put in an old-fashioned photo album. Can I get a yes and an amen for those of us who have been doing this almost 20 years? Because there wasn't social media to put it on. But it gave me some content to show people in a real-life portfolio when I took to their house, doing some stuff for free. When you get better, you can charge better. But in the beginning, sometimes you might have to do it for virtually nothing just to be able to get a little bit of work proof, for lack of a better word. Okay. So you're going to set your rates or your costs based on a skill. Number two, what it is that you need to make. I take it back to that same precious woman who may be in just a horrific relationship. And the one thing that's standing between her and freedom out of that, if that's what God is needing her to do, is usually finances. It's always usually finances. Listen, I have had the honor of employing more than one woman who has been in a terrible marriage. And what being able to do some painting and some making and gathering a skill did was it gave them confidence. And that confidence allowed them to do some painting and hustling and things for themselves. And that was able to allow them to have the finances to get out of tight places. Sometimes you don't need to be charging what you're worth. You're worth so much more anyway. You just need to be charging what it is you need to make to get what you need to do today. Some of you have a light bill that needs paid today, and you've got people telling you, charge $800 for that piece of furniture, and you know you could sell it at $500 tonight. Baby, dump that rate to $500 tonight. Your worth is not charged. That's a word for somebody right now. Your worth is not charged to that buffet you've been trying to get $800 out of just because somebody told you to. Also, when you're looking at your rates and your costs, you need to look at I was trying to think, what's the word? Is it tenure? Like the time that you've invested in this skill set. Is this the first time you've painted somebody's house for a living? Or do you have a decade? Because, sometimes the price changes based on just how long you've been into it. Another way that we set our prices is based on the audience we want to attract. My favorite example, and everybody that's in one of my coaching groups knows it, is I always use the example of Target and Walmart. Okay, because listen, Target is not struggling for sales, and they are pricing their things for a different market. They're more interested in the experience. They want to charge a little more and attract a different type of person. They can sell less and make the same as Walmart, who is marketing to a totally different market, who attracts a different type of people. You don't see on Target, the people of Target. You don't see that. You see this on Walmart. Now, Walmart made a conscious decision to price things lower, and they have to sell more of it to make the same as Target. Neither one is wrong, friends. The world needs both. And so if you're someone in business and you're listening to people say, you got to charge what you're worth, you got to up your prices, you don't necessarily have to. Perhaps you want to target and really serve the audience that will pay less, but you want to make or do more. And that's fine, babe. That's fine. Do what you need to do for your business. And the last way that you can look at, or the thing you can look at to set your rates or your cost is, figure out what is the problem that your product or your service solves. How quickly can you solve a problem, for example, for someone? When I think of like my chiropractor, how many of you know that when you're in some serious back pain, I don't care what my chiropractor charges me, fix my back. Can anybody relate to what I'm saying? When I don't feel well, I will pay anything, right? Can you relate to that? So, a chiropractor is in this amazing sweet spot where they can charge more because what is the problem, that they solve? Immediate back pain is what they solve for me. I'm willing to pay for that. When we're in different industries, such as, painting, I don't know that we're really solving a problem as much as we are adding to, somebody's decor or their life or how they feel about their home. When it comes to charging, I want you guys to remember a couple of things, and then I'm going to end this up. I'm going to land this plane in the words of my pastor, Philip, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to talk about next week, because it's going to be equally as fascinating, I think. That was my best Thurston Howell voice. Okay, so when it comes to charging, I want you to remember a few things. Number one, when you're an entrepreneur, when you own your own business, you get to decide. You get to decide, regardless of what your coach Jennifer tells you, regardless of what your other coaches tell you, regardless of what you're seeing on the internet, regardless of what the market is telling you, you get to decide. Baby, you're in charge. If somebody's going to tell you what to do, go back to a 9-to-5. But you're in charge, so you get to decide on your price, and you get to do what feels good for you and what feels like a fit for you. Number two, it is not permanent. Your pricing is not permanent. So few things on this side of heaven are permanent, my friends. What you decide to price your course, your painted piece of furniture, your wreath, your first dozen, cookies, your earrings, whatever. It's not permanent. You decide tomorrow that was a knuckleheaded decision, then you change it. Okay? And I need you to remember also that what you charge is only one part of your business being successful or making revenue. And next week, on the podcast, we're going to pick up right here. I'm going to ask you to stay tuned for next week, because I'm going to talk to you next week about the 4 things that actually determine you making sales and making some money. Okay, so just to recap here, friends, you are priceless in the eyes of the Lord. And the idea of charging what you are worth, it just is not accurate. And I want you to know, like I said, for those of you that have seen me talk about that, and for years, I prescribed to that theology. It's flawed theology. All right. You are not your work. Your worth is not in your work. All right. And you are worth so much in the eyes of the Lord. So thank you guys for being here again this week. I appreciate you. Please forward this podcast on to someone who is at home right now, trying to do a business, trying to figure all the things out, perhaps has been given bad advice, perhaps is just really struggling with pricing. Please go ahead and forward this podcast onto her. I would appreciate you so much. And for the rest of you, please make sure that you go over and leave us a review on iTunes. I don't know if you know this, but the way we get great podcast sponsors, the way we get great guests is oftentimes they will check to see how many reviews does a particular podcast have. We are nearing 1,000 reviews. So if you have a hot minute, I would love it if you slipped over to iTunes, left us a review, and I appreciate you. And until next week, stay creative. Bye-bye. Hey friend, thank you so much for listening to the podcast again this week. I'm so honored that you're here and that you just listen week in and week out and that you share the Jennifer Allwood Show with your friends and family. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, or if you're an Android user, go download the Stitcher app and you could subscribe there so that you know every single week when a new episode releases. Also, if you have any time to leave us a review, these reviews are super important in getting guests for the show and sponsors for the show. And so we'd appreciate it if you have just a second to leave us a review. That would be amazing. Thank you guys again for being here. And until next week, stay creative.